Great. I think that we are live on YouTube.
Give me a second.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, just give us a heads up when we're live and we'll kick it off.
I think it's... And you're live.
Thank you. Welcome to the Elixir Purple Carpet. I'm Meryl Dakin, and Sophie is here as well. We are going to be interviewing a few of the speakers, trainers, and sponsors for this year's ElixirConf Europe. And we're really excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Meryl. So some of you may be familiar with the first version of the purple carpet that we did for the ElixirConf that we recently wrapped up. I want to say here in the States, but everywhere is nowhere now. So I guess when I say here in the States, I really mean like Central Time versus whatever time zone we're in now. So yeah, purple carpet, you know it, you love it. We're going to be chatting with some of our speakers and trainers and sponsors and other folks that are involved in this excellent event. We'll be learning a little bit about what brings them to the conference, what they're excited about in the Elixir community now and in the future. And of course, we'll be chatting about some very appropriately Elixir and wizard themed topics, this time pertaining to everyone's favorite drink or elixir, if you will. And I'll just ask everyone that isn't actively speaking, just go ahead and mute yourself so that we can cut down on any background noise. Let's see, Meryl, do you want to kick us off by maybe picking one of our illustrious guests and asking them a few questions?
I'd love to. So I know that we have Francesco Cesarini here, who is, I think, kicking off the conference. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your involvement in this year's conference and what you're excited to hear about.
So, well, my involvement, I'll be opening the conference. I think it's a bit, being EU, I think it's a bit too early for Jim, and I think he needs his beauty sleep as much as I do. But, I think, asking me, to say what I'm most excited about, I think it's, the level of, diversity, I think, we've been able to achieve in the program, both, gender and ethnical diversity. And I think so, that's really something, to be proud of. And, that's something which, I'm really looking forward, to the use case and case studies, which now will be, given, from all over the world, not just, Europe or US, but I think, going virtual, I think has expanded and given us the opportunity, to have, let people, get presenters in to come and present without them having to travel. And that's really opened up the pool of presenters we have available now.
That's really interesting. I know we were talking about this last purple carpet, that it was unclear how it would go doing it virtual and what this event would be like and then what the conferences would be like. But it sounds like going virtual has expanded what you've seen as the amount of people and talent across the world that can join. Do you see that has been increasing over the last few years generally, or do you think that it's virtual conferences that have enabled us to do that?
So it has been increasing over the last few years, absolutely. But if you look at the whole, going virtual though has actually opened up, the ability to attend, to people who maybe wouldn't be able to attend, for financial reasons or even time. So it's expanded. It's really expanded. The number of attendees and speakers and volunteers drastically. I think we pulled off as soon as the UK went into lockdown. We went in and did the virtual GMT meetup. And initially, the idea was, okay, let's get the London crew together and listen to the presentation and and exchange a few jokes over a beer on Hangouts. And next thing we knew was, people were connecting from South Africa, Mauritius, Kenya, India, all the way, on to Eastern, Central, and Western United States and South America. And that wouldn't have been possible, previously. And
that's amazing. Sophie, do you want to ask anything or pick somebody else to
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just add too that it's definitely been so cool to see all of the ways that the community has really opened up even more. It's like accelerated that growth, all of the remote events that have been happening lately. And I really enjoyed attending. There's like a Columbus, Ohio Elixir meetup that I was able to call into a while back. And I may even have mentioned this in the last Purple Carpet. This is where I heard my favorite joke that I've heard in recent months. And it was, I probably said this already because I enjoyed it so much. Chris Keithley said something like, go really puts the go in go away. And as somebody that's been struggling with go lately, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, I just totally agree that these remote events have really been opening up the community, but it's really like, it's an acceleration and a continuation of, I think, something that's already been happening to the Elixir community, especially over the past years, which is like a ton of rapid growth, a ton of people from all different kinds of backgrounds, people who are beginners, people who have different types of experience coming in and contributing to this community and growing it. And Francesco, I'm curious, as the co-founder of Erlang Solutions, have you guys noticed, like what have you guys noticed about this growth as relates to your consultancy? Are you getting, more requests from different types of clients around the world? Or how are you kind of being impacted by this growth?
I think the biggest difference I would say is we're beginning to get more requests from the enterprise world, which is basically symbolizes, when enterprise starts adopting Elixir, you've grown up. It's you're not one of the early adopters anymore. You're not one of the innovators. It's becoming an accepted technology, within not only startups but enterprise alike. And so that's I think the biggest difference we've been seeing. And we're also seeing a lot of requests, still coming in for Erlang as well, which is really interesting as well. You'd think that Elixir will take over and Erlang will instead fade away, and instead Elixir has actually helped Erlang grow. So it's and then the two are keeping each other alive. It's almost like a symbiosis where they're both helping each other thrive and grow.
That's so interesting. Are you seeing differences in why someone would come to you for Erlang over Elixir or vice versa?
So Erlang, usually when it's a kind of very complex backend, which needs to be highly scalable, but doesn't require any front end. So it's almost kind of like the glue and the plumbing. They'll often come in and it's going to be an Erlang request. So if there's anything which is front-end related, UI, UX, or has APIs, or if it's a startup, then it will most definitely be Elixir. And then you've got a lot there in between who basically say, we don't really care. We just want it to be scalable and resilient. You advise us on how to move forward.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we'll switch gears for a moment. We'll head up some of our other speakers. And I think we have with us at the moment, just checking some last names. So we've got Sigu Magwa. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? One of our keynote speakers. So happy that you could join us. Tell us a little bit about what you'll be speaking on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And can you hear me? Just confirming.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. So just before I tell you about that, I'd just like to add something onto what you were just talking about, the ability for everyone to get to the conference. So when I went for the interview for my visa interview, so that we could travel to Poland, I was locked out by Corona, so I could not pick my passport. When I picked it about 2 weeks ago, I actually got a rejection, and I was being told that I could not travel to Poland because the reasons that I gave were not valid, were not sufficient for me to travel to Poland. So yeah, the conference has opened up a lot. So over to your question. What you're going to talk about actually is more about changing people's lives using Elixir. So we initially wanted to talk about, and we're still going to talk about the health services, but now we thought about how can we make this be how many times, rather than doing it in health, how many ways can we change people's life using Elixir? And how many times have we actually done it where we are? So that's exactly what you're going to share during our keynote on Thursday.
Would you say that Elixir is uniquely suited or especially well suited for some of the life-changing applications you've applied it to?
It's yes, it is. Most of the time, it was more of our preferred way of writing the code. So we tried it out, and the first time actually that we tried out Elixir, we were trying it out for doing payment integrations. So we use mobile payments a lot. I think majority of payments in our country is through the mobile phone. So in this particular application, it was not really a gateway, but we were supposed to create, I can call it a middleware or something, which picks up the request, processes it, and does some SMS and all that. So it really needed to be real time. It really needed to be concurrent, depending on how many users are making their request at that particular moment. So yes, it was the correct tool for that particular job. And at some points we overdid it and we got some spike arrests here and there. So we just had to limit how many requests you're making. But yes, it was the right tool for this job.
It sounds like you're describing, at least in my experience, what ends up being kind of a common problem. It's so concurrent that you can sort of sometimes overload your own systems or overload some external API, which is, you know, all things considered, not a bad problem to have, but I think we've definitely been there.
Yep. So yeah, it was a nice experience. Actually, I think the overall, the main reason for the moment why we really like using Elixir is because of how good it is to us as developers. How early do we catch our errors? You get very good compile time errors just before you try to run anything. So it made me a bit careless on how I write my variable names and all that, because it will tell me, hey, dude, there's something wrong there. So, but again, the experience is amazing. I can liken it to, I've tried Elm a bit, the step-by-step and all that, yeah.
What were you coming from before you discovered Elixir and started writing in Elixir? Was it Elm or was it something before that?
Not really. I'm really a fan of picking one thing and sticking to it. So right before that, I picked Ruby and stuck to it for the longest time. Used it for quite a long time, and I could not listen to anyone talking about any other language. And coincidentally, somehow someone managed to convince me to try out Elixir. It was during a mob programming session where there was actually, we were going through Dev Thomas's book, if I'm not wrong. So they were going through Dev Thomas's book, doing a mob session on that. So they're like, no, Sigu, you have to try this. I know you love Ruby, but you might love this one. Just give it a try. And that's how I made my first switch over to Elixir. Yeah, so it was from Ruby to Elixir. Then from there, I was like, yeah, functional looks cool. Let me try any other functional thing. I went over to Elm, tried out Elm for the front end, got so excited and I started looking for functional for mobile. None for the moment. Yeah.
I think that you're probably in very good company. I know I came from Ruby and Sophie as well before we came to Elixir. So it's quite the trend. That's really exciting. I was looking at the details of your talk a little bit before this, and it's really exciting to see Elixir being applied in this way, but also just the concept of being able to reach out. And I know there's a Coding for Good talk in this conference as well. And that's also just a really nice thing to bring into these conferences and see people working on and bring to the forefront, especially this year. Thank you so much. I'd love to hear from Bruno Ripa. If you can tell us a little bit about your involvement in the conference and what you're going to be doing here this year.
Yes, your talk title is very mysterious, so I'm eager to hear what it's about.
Yeah, it is. The second slide, hi everyone. And in fact, the second slide is explaining the reasons behind the title. Anyway, I'm having a talk in which I will be sharing my experience of joining a startup, my last job. A startup that chose Elixir to build from scratch an IoT platform without any previous Elixir knowledge. And I have seen how this pretty big bet was totally won, because actually in 11 months we created complete end-to-end. It was called proof of concept of the platform. Along the road, we started calling it minimum viable product, because it was really over our expectations in terms of things we were able to do in just 11 months. And I have found this very, very interesting. So I will be happy to share at the conference.
I think it's really not uncommon to kind of hear stories like this, right? Like we reached for Elixir and we found that we were able to be so productive in it, and we were able to go above and beyond, and what we were aiming for, it exceeded our expectations. So I don't want to spoil your talk too much, but I'm curious, what is it about Elixir, in your opinion, that enabled you guys to be so productive and to exceed your expectations?
First of all, the learning curve, in my opinion, is pretty flat. I would say it looks reductive, but basically that means that, in my opinion, for like 90% of the tools that language gives you, you don't struggle fighting the friction between theory and practice. Really, you can read your code, your book, or your few pages, and write some working code. Of course, when you touch something like concurrency and these kind of topics, there is some background knowledge that you have to do. But provided you have that, is really incredible. I have seen people, that's what I am going to share tomorrow. I have seen people being absolutely unaware of what Elixir was. And we literally made the first microservice in 10 days. It never changed over the 11 months. So they were really, really happy with that. And another interesting thing was the fact that I saw how best practices were nicely being adopted by the guys that worked on the project, because they were basically perceived as effective, healthy, and super productive. So that was really, really a good experience. There was a challenge. There was a challenge definitely there, but it was very good.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about the easy adoption of Elixir. I'm curious, when you're talking about the challenges, what, if any, were like major challenges that you guys experienced?
Sure. First of all, the challenge was the context. I will explain tomorrow, or on Wednesday, that the company was really a startup, which means that they got a bunch of PhDs guys in astronomics, satellite knowledge, that kind of very, very niche knowledge. And they were creating, they have a proprietary solution that is able to enable GPS geolocation in scenarios where that is normally GPS denied, with a crazy precision in terms of centimeters. Whatever asset, whatever thing, in real time, via what will become a software as a service product, made all from scratch in Elixir. And with two kind of teams. On one team, we got the research and development team that were really deeply knowledgeable about the topic. And literally no developers, no pure developers, because there were a bunch of them that were still in the research team. So it is a field where, lots of good practices that we adopt, like TDD, test-driven design, CI/CD, is not really meaningful to them. They have to study algorithms, they have to write papers, they have to be crazy focused on the problem and on the proposed solution. So that was definitely a challenge. The nice thing is that I pitched Elixir literally in 15 minutes, drinking a glass of wine with the team lead that had a pretty big career in his path. Very big career in his path, and was aware of Erlang. never heard of Elixir, but he was aware of Erlang. So he was really curious about my, let's say, pitch, although it was a lovely discussion, you know, but I did it in the end.
It just
I
takes
think
one
that-
advocate of
Yeah,
Elixir.
it just takes one glass of wine and one Elixir advocate to change the world.
Yeah.
But I really think stories like this are one of the many reasons that, you know, I'm not at all surprised to hear, like Francesco was mentioning, that big enterprise customers are now kind of coming out and leveraging Elixir, because when you have a framework that has such a low barrier to entry for people adopting it and learning it, that enables your team to be so productive, I think what that means is you end up with a team that's able to put the needs of the business first much more easily, because you're not constrained by the language, you're not constrained by the framework. And then of course there are all these like Elixir ecosystems niceties like telemetry, for example, dropping a breadcrumb for my keynote, that you know, again, I think makes it really easy to meet the needs of the business in a way that I think it's really gonna empower engineering teams, and we're gonna see that more and more. So I love hearing how successful you guys were able to be with Elixir.
There is another thing that I saw being very interesting. Assuming that the guys that I was working on were really skilled in terms of computer science knowledge, literally just the official Elixir documentation and a little bit of the community was absolutely enough to make them super productive and autonomous, but really like probably 4 or 5 weeks. So that was, to me, that was absolutely fantastic, because apart from the pleasure of working in a healthy environment, was really good to see that the tool that I am actually picking up from my professional, you know, career is really getting a good grip. So that was nice.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. The documentation is often really all you need to kind of solve a problem and get going in a really meaningful way. Whereas I find with so many other languages and frameworks, I end up kind of wading through a series of blog posts before I feel like I can go and do the thing I need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the questions that we wanted to ask y'all, I don't know who all maybe has a drink or an Elixir to share. It might be just Jim, who I peeped drinking a Diet Coke. Is that what you're sipping on, Jim?
Oh, basically, I don't prepare by myself, but I have a bunch, of course. Wine, drinks, whatever you want. I'm normally after Moscow Mule, or for example, rum and coke, of course, when I don't want to push too far. But also, I really love wines, of course. Probably it's mostly a cultural thing, you know. In Italy, we end up drinking lots of nice wines from lots of regions, all totally different and lovely. So yeah, but probably I'm better at cooking.
You have a specialty dish that you would always whip out? Let's say you needed to impress someone. What are you cooking them?
No, I cook pretty much. I cook. Well, lockdown helped a lot, of course. So yeah, I cook risottos. I cook. Yeah, I cook a lot. It depends on the ingredients that I'm able to find here in London.
I'm drinking a green tea that is labeled brain green tea. It supposedly makes me smarter.
That's real. Yeah,
when
that sounds definitely real. 100% accurate.
I think it's accurate. I feel smarter when I drink it.
Yeah, you look smarter too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I think Oh no, go ahead.
Call it the placebo effect.
No, I think it's real. I think it might be real.
It might
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, pretty sure it's real.
If I drink
need to get some.
Does anyone else have a beverage they'd like to share? No one across our various time zones.
I think everyone became a cocktail kind of maker during lockdown. It's
It was necessary.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
we ended up emptying basically all these half-open bottles, which had been there for probably 10,
years.
15 years.
Yeah.
Figuring out, okay, what cocktail can we make out of this, or what cocktail can we make out of that? And yeah, we've had some really interesting experiments.
I had some early failures because I enjoy cocktails, but I never made them for myself before lockdown. So like one of the first few weeks of, all of this, I texted Meryl, who I'll reveal, in a previous life was a bartender, and I said something like, help, how do I make a martini? But you didn't get back to me immediately, and I needed to make it immediately. So by the time you had called me back, I think I was drinking a martini that literally had ice cubes in it, because I just really failed to put that recipe together.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, by that time it was delicious, and I wasn't complaining. Yeah. But I think we've yet to hear from another of our speakers who's on deck here. We've got Victor Nascimento. Welcome, Victor. Thanks for joining us. I hope I said your name right. I haven't had a chance to practice before we all got together today.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you. We would love to hear a little bit about the talk that brings you to ElixirConf this year.
All right, so thank you for receiving me here. I'm Victor from Brazil. I'm going to talk how a payment company here in Brazil started a team with 5 people only to make a bank from nothing, and we are 2 years in production, and the team has grown to like 200 people currently. So it's been a huge success for us inside the company, and it is 95% about Elixir, because it was a bet of the research department who were doing things like blockchains and payment gateways, and trying to understand how things like that are happening in China, happening in Africa, as Sigo said, would change the way payments work in Brazil. But in the end, it is a very boring solution of APIs that work just pretty well, and it's pretty stable. And it's changing how the company is thinking towards technology. First, we were thinking about and not worrying too much about technology, and the focus was more about being present in Brazil, which is a huge country, it's a continent. But with technology, with Elixir specifically, we've managed to change the focus of the whole company. And it's a big company. We have like 6,000 employees currently, and we are like, it's a huge company, and to change the focus of a huge company through a language, it's something that I think it's very powerful and shows how good Elixir as a platform is for us currently. So I'm really happy to share this story with the broader public.
That's really interesting. I also noticed in your bio that you call yourself a philosophy engineer, and that plays a big part in software for you. Does that relate to your adoption of Elixir in any way or for any reason?
Well, that is actually true. I have a major in philosophy. I don't come from IT specifically. And Elixir, yes, it plays a very big role because when you say that you've studied philosophy, you always attract this kind of discussions about, for example, what is an object, right? Before Elixir, I come from Java, and there is this thing in computer science, which is the abstraction. How do you design something? And you have layers of concepts and semantics that you build so that you can use natural language to express what a computer will do. Elixir has a role because Joe Armstrong was a very influential tech guy who had very big quotes, right? For example, his quote about Java is one that I repeat very frequently about the context of an object which you have. So Elixir always helped me, for example, discuss about objects. There are a lot of people who say that Erlang is more object-oriented than Java and other languages, for example. So as a philosopher, this always helped me attract more discussion, and this is good to me because I like that. So yes, it played a huge role in keeping discussions up to date. I really think Elixir helped me be more critical about standards, about the establishment. So I think this is true for everybody that knows Erlang for the first time. The VM is completely different from all the other major tech we have. So this helps a lot, and I always tell my team to be very critical about the things we consume as reading blogs, reading technology, and it helped a lot to keep that critical mind because it's so different and it works so well. So why not? It wasn't more public before. So I think this really helped me on my critical thinking.
I know that coming from a not IT background, I was an English major, and I feel similarly in that a lot of the discussions past the point of like the semantics of things is so intertwined with our ability to communicate with each other at a very clear level. And so if our definitions of something are even slightly off, our modeling is going to be very different depending on which parts of the product you're working on. If you're coming from the back end or the front end, or like communicating with product, the ability to align on all of those things is so crucial. So I imagine that bringing a philosophy background can be even more useful when you have the idea of like which kinds of what is a thing, not just what are we naming this, but what is the essence of the thing that we are trying to do. Do you think that you were talking about a lot of object-oriented languages versus Elixir, and do you think that it's more Elixir in particular, or do you think it's functional language in general that helps you clarify and forces a clarity there for you?
Well, I think functional programming certainly plays a role, but I don't think that the word functional is the main part of it. Uh, I think all these categories are good for us to try to understand something, but Elixir uh, is not purely functional. So you start to get into some gray areas, and I think what matters more is not if it is functional or if it is object oriented. Although I love the discussions, I love bike shedding as a hobby, of course. But I think that Elixir is a very practical language, and it helps a lot when you're having like a huge discussion. You can prototype quickly, you can show ideas very quickly, and the power of having something that actually works really fast is sometimes what really settles a discussion. So you have many points of view about this would be better this way or that way, and then like in minutes you can prototype something and show this very clearly. What I think is that the functional side of Elixir makes things more explicit, and this was a design goal, I think, by Valim. And explicitness also helps showing arguments faster, right? When you show some, for example, I'm talking about Java because I used to work with Java, so I can only say bad things about Java because I know from experience, right? So most of the code that I used to see in Java were very, very implicit. So you had to know like tens of specifications of enterprise specifications and all that context that Joe Armstrong said that every object had with it before you could show what you were intending to do with the code. That's my opinion, at least. I don't want to harm anybody's opinion. But I think that the functional side of Elixir makes everything very explicit. For example, the way we avoid using imports or macros injecting things into, this is considered a bad practice most of the time because it makes things implicit. So I think the functional side helps because it's more explicit.
I think Meryl actually has a really nice illustration. I think you're referring to the Joe Armstrong quote about, what is it? You wanted a banana, but what you actually got was the gorilla holding the banana in the jungle. You're gonna have to dig up that illustration, Meryl, and we can share it on Twitter. It's a really nice, very sophisticated, extremely artistic rendering of a banana, a gorilla, and a jungle. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I think we have some new folks who are trickling in. I think we may have missed our opportunity. Oh no, Jim is still here. Excellent. We haven't yet heard from Jim, one of the organizers and creators of ElixirConf and ElixirConf EU. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
So, question for you, in addition to a question about your beverage, which I'll get to in a moment. I imagine this year is a very different year for ElixirConf. What's your take on that? How do you think these remote ElixirConf events have been going? What have you seen change?
Well, they've gone a lot better than I thought they would. So I think, we do miss being together in person and going out to new places and things like that. But, as far as the quality of the talks, it's just like, literally, I think, I've had to process the videos for all the talks for ElixirConf, and they were just like, wow, everyone was outstanding. And, I thought it would be hard to give a talk to a wall, because that's essentially what you're doing, right? I'd like to hear your comments on that, Sophie, sometime, because it's like, there's no audience, there's no feedback, but all the talks were really good. So that really surprised me. Plus we had, we were able to get speakers from locations that we would not have had before. And I just thought, just the variety of talks and the quality speakers was just fantastic.
I actually liked giving a talk to a wall, so to speak. Like, I wouldn't describe myself as somebody that gets like super nervous with public speaking, but if you get up there in front of however many people, like, you're gonna feel some kind of way. And somehow just being, sitting at my desk where I am every day took that edge off a little bit. So I wonder if other people felt or will feel the same way.
That was part of the theory, is that, hey, you're home, you're a little more relaxed than, with the lights on you and everyone's staring at you.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely felt that way. And do you have a beverage to share with us? I think I saw you drinking a Diet Coke earlier. That definitely counts.
Well, so I got a background going. I can't show my beverage.
Yeah, excellent. Diet Coke is not a sponsor of this event. Just FYI for everyone watching, we are not getting anything.
It's better with
better with your amazing ElixirConf mug.
Oh,
yeah, I love the branding this year of the big Elixir drop. Excellent.
Oh, and I got my t-shirt on too.
So nice.
You can wear this.
Yeah, looking forward to grabbing one of those. So in the theme of our Elixirists in the room, if your Diet Coke was a real magic elixir, what would be the result of drinking it?
Short-term memory.
Better short-term memory? All your short-term memory comes flooding back?
I have to use Google for everything. I can't remember anything.
May I recommend brain green tea?
That definitely is real and works.
It's definitely a real thing. It's got green tea and ginkgo, which I think is a thing as well. So if you want to pick some of this up, I'm sure it works very well. And it's not just the caffeine after several cups that makes you feel smarter.
Yeah, I'm always impressed with the people who can just pull off these commands that, I don't know if they've run them like 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago, but yeah. There's definitely talent there, so I'll tell you a story. We had this friend, and she was a concert violinist, and she was very, very good, 16 years old. And so she's like giving us this private little concert, right? And we'll say, hey, I forgot what it was, probably that Italian piece with Goes Crazy, Figaro or something. And we're like, can you play this for us? And so she's like, well, I haven't played that in like 2 years. And she pauses for like 5 seconds and starts playing it. It was like a 15-minute piece. And it's like a 20,000 notes, whatever. And she just played it. It's like, wow, no music, nothing, just from memory. So I'm like,
That makes me feel even worse about not recognizing code that I wrote even like a week ago.
can't programmers do that? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't
Definitely
translate.
not. No, opposite.
Definitely not.
What's that API again? I just looked at it 5 seconds ago. I don't know.
Yeah, Google it again.
Well, thank you to all the speakers that we just had. I think that they have left the room. We have a new crew of people in here. And in the spirit of talking about elixirs, Claudio Ordolina, I think is how you pronounce your last name.
Yeah.
You also say that you enjoy cooking, which is not an elixir, but it is food-based.
It is food-based. Yeah.
I'd love to hear about what things you like to cook and what magical powers they might have.
It depends on the day, I guess, like what magical powers. Like Sunday stuff tends to be like really, really comforting nowadays, especially for the situation outside. Now, I think I started cooking more when I moved from Italy. I moved to the UK. And then basically that meant that basically my mom, my grandma, they weren't there anymore to cook like traditional food and things that I enjoy. So I started picking that up just to continue that. And then, it goes from there. I think it's just a passion that I try to keep up a little bit for tradition, a little bit for curiosity. But it's nice. It's just like a very much a common language that you can speak with everyone around the world at that point. Like it's very difficult that if you start to have a conversation about food, it's not an enjoyable conversation, especially if you ask questions more than just saying like, here my cooking, which is great and it's better than yours, which immediately a lot of people I find from Italy are very guilty of. Like they just say like, it's better than yours. That's not true. It's just different. But yeah, I don't know. I think I started to get into a little bit of like, this is my wife actually, in ingredients. I'll point the camera. But this is the biggest thing that happened in the lockdown. This is my living room.
Wow.
This is a tomato plant, or more than one. It's like 8 of them, or more. I don't know. We started from like seeds, and it's like, I don't know if you can see them from the top, but there's like 80 now tomatoes. 50, 60, we already ate them. But it's just, they just grow. Apparently, they grow in 2 varieties. One of them which is this one, clearly, doesn't stop going vertical. So the theory is that they will wrap around and then fall back down, or either because it has to, or because we make it, because otherwise it just doesn't fit. It's way taller than me. Not that I'm a very tall person, but yeah.
You started growing this during quarantine?
Yeah, like beginning
God.
of March, I think.
Fast things grow. I don't. That's amazing.
No, you spend like the first 2-3 weeks where pretty much nothing happens. I think it's because there were seeds from tomatoes that you buy at the supermarket, right? So it's not that they were particularly good or anything like that. So it just takes time for them to remember that they are seeds and that they can grow again. Because if you grow them and then plant them again, the second time it's just much quicker. But like after like 2-3 weeks, like something came out, and then like it just, honestly, I tried to make a time lapse, and you could see them growing overnight, like physically getting taller. And the taller they are, the faster they grow. So it's a little bit worrying now, because what are you gonna do when you leave them? They drink like 4 or 5 liters of water every day. So I'm not sure what's gonna happen in that respect. But
that's pretty incredible. We have a small garden growing on our fire escape now.
Yeah.
Which my husband is tending, and which I've suggested is potentially a fire hazard. But when we have
to start any fires.
Yeah, so it's fine. We're just gonna have to traipsy through the garden to get down the fire escape. Yeah. But thank you for the tomato tree demonstration. I'm gonna have to tell him that there is much more that's possible with indoor gardening than we previously thought.
I think you just need light. That's the only thing. You just need light, and that's it.
That's amazing. So I'd love to hear about your talk that you're going to be giving at the conference, without spoiling too much of it. But
no, it's fine. I mean, I think it's one of those. I hope it's one of those talks that ends up basically like being useful for quite some time. I'm going to talk about, I think, large files, which seems to be per se, it doesn't seem like there's much to it, but it's one of those things where you can really shoot yourself in the foot very fast. And that if that happens in production, and that's the kind of thing that wakes you up at night, and then you have to deal with that if you're at least if you're responsible for that. And I think it just comes from the fact that like my day job, I mean now I don't write much code anymore in the last few months, but I used to maintain an application that deals with pretty much processing PDF files, which tend to be like either like 20K, very tiny, to a few gigabytes, depending on how much people stretch it in that respect, because you can shove anything into a PDF file, so it's it can be huge. And a lot of it went like through trial and error a little bit, like in terms of learning how to deal with that over time. So I wanted to sort of like try and collect some of these principles and ideas and examples in the hope that it would help someone like someone out there that might face the same problem.
I know that I work at Frame.io. We work with all kinds of very large files, including PDFs, but mostly video files, and that we have a dedicated media pipeline team to deal with. So that is going to be an interesting talk, and I'm sure really applicable to a lot of people here. Sophie, would you like to introduce a new speaker for us?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm actually just going to go across the top of my little video bar, which brings us to Devin Estes. Welcome, Devin.
Howdy.
Glad you could join us. So actually, we last spoke when you joined us on an episode of Elixir Mix a couple of months ago at this point, and we talked a little bit about Credo and a new testing library you were working on, but I'd love to hear what you've been up to lately and maybe a little bit about what you'll be speaking on this week.
Well, lately it's been, I mean, mostly moving. We moved to a new apartment, and that takes a lot of time, and getting our German driver's licenses also takes a lot of time. But code-wise, yeah, I'm writing code, working in Elixir and other things for a company, and oh, we might have a kid or two come in a second. I think they just got home, but yeah, writing Elixir, I haven't had a whole ton of time for open source because of the whole moving and German driver's license stuff. But yeah, I'm hoping to one day soon make some more progress on a good mutation testing library. It's sort of the thing that I've really wanted to have for a long time and just isn't there quite yet. So I would, hang on a second. Let's just let him in. They'll be okay.
Yeah, not at all.
Hey kiddo, that's fine. You want to come say hi?
No, he has to wash his hands.
Oh, he's still got to wash his hands. Okay, cool. He still has to wash his hands. So yeah, a mutation testing library so that I can like have some idea of what's actually being tested in my application. Code coverage just doesn't really cut it. And for a lot of applications, we actually really care if we have regressions. Turns out people don't like bugs in their software. And
weird.
So yeah, and so having some more confidence in my test suite would make me a whole lot happier because I'm someone that relies really heavily on the test suite when I work. And that's just sort of a part of my workflow. And so for me, especially having that tool would be really, really helpful. And I'm actually not speaking, I'm doing a training, actually did a training, just wrapped up a little bit ago, but on testing. So that was,
awesome.
That was the training I did today. So testing from start to finish, like from the very basics all the way through. At the end, we got up to stateful property-based testing, which is certainly not easy, but very, very powerful. And hopefully everybody at the training got to sort of learn the basics. My goal was to teach them, give them the tools and some of the theory and some of the like trade-offs that you would need to make, or that you might have to encounter, and some choices that you might need to make so that you can approach writing tests with that knowledge and with a wider tool set. And you can hopefully write a really good, solid test suite, and that'll serve the application well and serve the future developers working on the application well too, because there are a lot of different ways that tests provide value. To me, I mean, as someone who for 8 years has been a consultant, a whole lot of that value is in communication about intent. And so that's an important part of tests that some folks don't always see or don't always, maybe just don't value. But for me, I find it really important that somebody wrote what this function is supposed to do. Like it's runnable documentation, in code form, not in prose, but in code, saying that, somebody said that when I do this with this function, that I expect it to do these things. So it's probably not just a fluke if it does those things, but maybe. But yeah, that's the idea. It was all about testing, and funny enough, in Elixir, we're lucky to where you can get all you need to write a lot of, like, all of the tests in a day. It's not a terribly difficult platform to test because it's functional language, because it's immutable. There aren't a whole lot of kinds of tests. There's really just like you're testing functions by calling functions, or you're testing some user-facing API by using that API, be it a browser or JSON API or a CLI or something like that. So yeah, luckily the primitives of testing it are pretty simple. It's the hard part is the trade-offs, and when you would choose one thing versus another in terms of like a mocking strategy. If you need to mock something out, when would you mock something out? Things like that. So those are the harder things. And then of course the property-based testing stuff is usually pretty new to a lot of people. So when to do that, what sort of things make good properties, and then just the like, how do you do it? Usually that's the easier part, but it's still pretty tricky. It's still a difficult thing. It takes some practice and some learning.
And was this your first training that you gave virtually?
Kind of. So as part of my work, I've done work with teams, and I've been remote for almost all of the 8 years. So I've done variations on this training, but usually it's with people that I already kind of know, like I've worked with for a little bit, again, remotely, but like I've been on their team for a little bit before I jump right into a training with them. So this is the first training like this that I've done virtually, where like I didn't know any of the attendees. It's a little easier when you already know folks a little bit, because you can know like, oh, I know this person doesn't really ask questions. You need to actually ask them like, hey, like, Jim, are you cool with this? Or they might not speak up. So like that's it's a little easier to do it that way, but it worked pretty well. It was actually my first time using breakout rooms at all, because that was sort of the thing that I was trying to recreate in the training. It's usually when you do an in-person training, you'll have people like when they're doing some work, some exercise or something, I'll be able to walk around and answer questions, make sure if anybody's like stuck or confused that I can help them through. But that worked pretty well with the breakout rooms, so that if people are in their groups of 2 or 3 and they're doing work and somebody's stuck or they have a question, they just holler and I can just hop in and help them out and answer their question and help them work through it. So yeah, it works pretty well. I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't have, I thought it would be worse than it was, and I was surprised.
That's always great to hear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had an inkling that it could be okay, but I was like, I don't know. Like, I was one of those people who's like, being in person and being able to go around and walk around is like really important. But the breakout rooms worked really well. It was maybe being in person isn't as important as I thought it was, but.
Yeah, I had really the exact same experience with the training that I did for ElixirConf US edition, which is I was kind of nervous. Definitely one of those people that I want to read the room. I want to see the looks on people's faces, or like the body language that tells you that someone is super confused. But the breakout rooms really did a good job of giving you that. You could kind of float between the rooms, check in with people in a smaller environment. And I don't want to say I was surprised that it went really well, but I guess, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that I didn't feel some of the pain points I anticipated.
I would say I felt the same way about the last Purple Carpet event, that I didn't know it was going to go as well as it did. And it's going much better than like I could have imagined it going.
Right. Not that we thought it would be like a disaster by any means, but just that it ended up going really smoothly. Yeah.
There's always anxiety around doing something for the first time,
Totally.
And like, of course, in our heads, we imagine like these are all the ways it could go wrong. And then like, luckily those things rarely, if ever, happen. And like, often there are things that can go really well that we don't even anticipate, because that's sort of just like most people are, I guess, at least the way I am. I'm always preparing for like what can go wrong and how can I avoid it. But yeah.
And big shout out to the producers and volunteers of ElixirConf US and Europe. That's why it's going so well. So
Yeah,
thank
they
you guys.
help a whole lot.
I know we have another trainer here. I don't know if you've done your training, Dennis, or not yet, but Gonchar, is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yep.
So thank you for being here, and I'd love to hear about what your training is going to be or was about.
Well, that was a training for those who haven't participated in Devon's training. It was about tracing, how to fix the stuff that you haven't tested.
Is this, I mean, when I think tracing in Elixir, I just think like Erlang trace, but I imagine there's more to it than that.
Well,
or no?
It's not related really to the language. It's a runtime feature. And I'm not even sure if all of the Beam features are supported in other Erlang or Elixir runtimes. Probably not, but well, we are focusing mostly on Beam facilities, and they're amazing. I would say for me that is a killer feature to go with Beam technology.
Would you say that you find it to be an underutilized part? I imagine that is true of people running Elixir and Erlang programs, that they aren't tapping quite into this tracing aspect.
Oh, I'm a bit surprised with the amount of people who are working with the Elixir, especially with the Elixir, and not really familiar with the details of tracing, because it's like you have a great tool set and you're just avoiding it. And I was working for more than 8 years in embedded programming, and that was freaking me out that you need to like change the code, recompile it, reload it, and only then you can see some additional printfs added. And once the guys from Erlang Solutions, by the time I was not working here, showed me the way how to do it just with a REPL cycle, that was like, I think I fixed that day a couple of issues I was struggling with for the last week. So that was super turbocharged for me.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing commendation of it. Where I imagine there's a lot of people who aren't maybe sure where to start. Would you suggest, outside of your training, obviously, there is a good place for people to get a sense of what tracing can do for them and the power of it and where to get started with it?
Yeah, unfortunately, official documentation, it's quite complex to read it because it's split in a couple of areas. Well, for me, that was helpful to start with some rather high level libraries like Redbugs for Elixir. It has a wrapper Rexbug. It allows you to use it without even knowing how to create a match spec, which is probably the hardest for understanding part. So it already gives you a huge advantage if you get used to use these tools in your working cycle. So, but later on you can try to dive deeper. Some presentations. Actually, there are a lot of YouTube materials. I think the one most popular was called like No More Printfs or something like this. It was done in 2017 or maybe 2016. I don't remember for sure, but that was really good. What else? Probably Erlang Genanga. It can give you some software introduction into the internals. And overall, troubleshooting the Erlang system, not only the tracing part.
It seems like a good reason to get into Elixir to take advantage of these kinds of tool sets that it has. Have you noticed this in other languages that they have this kind of like robust tracing tool set, or do you think this is something that is pretty unique to the environment that we have with Erlang and Elixir?
The funny thing is that you don't need to introduce anything; it is already there. So that's something that comes for free, and that's amazing. While preparing the training, I have also noticed that the tool set is, well, it continues evolving. So, for example, there is a thing called sequential tracing, and they finally fixed the spawning process in OTP 23, and finally it can be used with the full power. So that's really cool that even this powerful tools, they're still evolving and getting better. Sorry, I'm a bit tired after the meeting and not very productive.
No, this is really helpful. I'm definitely excited
hours.
I know everyone's in such a different time zone too, so our energy levels are probably all over the board, but that is super great to hear, and I'm excited to check out some of those resources. And I think we have yet another trainer with us on the call right now. We have Mariano Guerra, who is, I believe you've previously referred to yourself, hello and welcome, as an unofficial Riak cheerleader, and Riak is of course the topic of your training. So tell us a little bit about your training. Did y'all give it yet, or is it tomorrow?
No, it's tomorrow. Yeah. So yeah, it's distributed systems with Riak Core Lite, and I'm giving it together with Aniet Villanusa, which is a doctor in distributed systems, so she knows much more about me than the theoretical side. And she is part of a team that works with other universities in Europe, and they have a database called Antidote.db, and that's based on Riak Core. And we have been working together since January, trying to better package Riak Core and make it more accessible. And since the end of last year, I was trying to generate more content on the Elixir side for Riak Core. So this training is about the mix of theory and practice of distributed systems, using Riak Core as the tool, as the practical part, but exploring other things. And yeah, we will go from setting up the tools, a project, writing the first line of code, creating a key value store, initially in memory, how to run it, how to build it, how to set up a cluster, how to try handoff moving data around nodes, how to make sure they are there, how to test it with common test, which is a way to test. You can spawn nodes, create a cluster, join the nodes, and test that everything is doing what it should be, and how to benchmark the system. And if we get to the extras, how to expose it with a Redis compatible API, and how to implement persistent storage so that the key value store survives between restarts. And yeah, and we will mix every single part will be theory and practice. And I think it's cool because first, every time I've done this in the past, it was mostly practical because of time and because of what I did the most. And now mixing it with theory, like seeing both sides and seeing how things connect on both sides. And also, and the extras is the first time that we managed to cover testing and benchmarking. And so it's getting extra things and more. It will cover more things on distributed system, not only like setting up your first distributed system, but like getting to testing and benchmarking and stuff like that.
That's definitely a very ambitious day, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think the topic of testing is something that definitely doesn't get, I think, the love that it deserves when it comes to distributed systems, because it's very difficult, at least in my experience. So I think it's great that you guys are adding that into the training. And if we did want to learn, those of us who maybe are not able to attend the training, if we did want to learn a little bit more about testing distributed systems, any recommendations?
It will eventually be part of the official documentation of our project, which we never announce it, so it may be the first official announcement. It's called Riak Lite, which is a subset of Riak that is more modern, more maintainable, and it compiles easily in all platforms, and it's easier to maintain. And we are adding libraries to do testing for Riak Lite applications as a library. So you just import a library and you use the functions, and it allows you to easily set up a cluster, wait until all the nodes start, wait until all the nodes join and stuff like that as a library. So you don't have to do it by hand all the time. And in more in general, I think the book from Fred Ebert, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, on property-based testing is a good way, because you can like create a model of a distributed system that behaves as you expect it behaves, and you model run the model and using a client for a distributed system, for example, run the same requests on the actual system, and then you compare that things behave the same way in both sides. So that's a cool thing about property-based testing, and that also it generates corner cases that are pretty hard to generate by hand. And there's a blog, well, I don't know if it's a blog, but it's called Jepsen, which is a tool to test distributed system properties, mostly databases. And every time the author tests a database, he writes a really good blog post where he explains like the setup, how he's approaching the problem, which are the properties of the database, how he creates the model, how he tests, what he found, and stuff like that. And that's really cool. It's agnostic of language. That's because since it uses the clients for the databases can be in any language.
Excellent, thank you for sharing. And for anyone who didn't catch that, I'm not familiar with the blog, but the book you're mentioning, I believe, is property-based testing with proper Erlang and Elixir. Find bugs before your users do. And you were totally right. It is Frank Herbert. Is how I would say it. I don't know the right way to pronounce it. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm very excited to hear that Riak is going to include within the framework some of these testing niceties, and that's going to get built into the application, because that's kind of exactly what I wanted to hear to the question of, how do I do this? If the answer is, oh, you don't have to, we're going to do it for you.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mariano. I want to talk to our last speaker that we have in the room, Sandesh Soni, about your goal of planting 100 trees, which seems very aligned with Claudio's current quarantine goals in the tomato arena. Can you talk to us a little bit about where you're at in that?
I'm presently in Pune, India, and the goal is not just planting and growing them, making them make sure at least 5 years I want to volunteer to see the trees are alive, because it happens that every year lakhs of trees are planted. Next year the same amount of trees are planted at the same place. And I come from this region. The problem is if we go 3 years back into history, my region was declared drought area, so there was no water. You can imagine no water to drink or bath. Especially trains were arranged to carry water from maybe 300 kilometers far to the city, because there is no water. That made me realize that we plant trees, but they do not stay. They must stay alive, and that's the need that will make the balance the cycle of atmosphere, cloud, rain. That's what I want to fix.
Do you have any plans in place on how you want to accomplish that? Is there something different that could be done that isn't being done right now that you're seeing that you want to participate in?
I did not get your question. Please, can you repeat again?
How are you going to accomplish it, I guess? Like what is there to be done that isn't being done right now?
So I need to visit farmers, make a list, and also farmers and school childrens. So the task will be to the school children, when you go to school and come back, just keep an eye that the tree is there, and the small incentive of like sometimes some chocolate, sometimes some biscuit, just some in the villages, and children will be more than happy. They just need to uh, see if the tree is there in place properly.
That's actually a great idea. Just bribe kids with candy to make sure the trees are alive. I like
Yes,
that.
and also accomplish our work and make this consistent for a few years. And there can even be a prize that to the school children we can say, if this tree is there for 3 years, you take care of it. At the end of 3 years, I will give you a good prize, good amount. There is more of emotional attachment over the money of winning something in early childhood. That is going to be a big thing for.
Yeah, for sure. That's amazing. Well, I love that we have some tree conversations going on. We can post these tree pictures to Twitter with the Elixir conference hashtag. So this can be a theme of this event. But I'd love to hear also about your talk. I know you're going to give a talk about live view, I believe.
It's less of talk. It's more of AMA session. Ask me anything about live view. So these days I have messaged a few people, like those who have written good blogs of live view, asking them what problems people face. I'm also scanning the Slack channel, going through the questions people have asked, and making a list. So I have some pen on paper. I have drafted few things, adding more and making a list. So depending on, say, let's see what the questions people have, we can answer them.
And what are you using live view in production with applications right now?
Yes, I'm using live view by default. I'm building some basic application. It's not a real use case of live view right now, but in future it it can be a live view use case. So today, right now, I'm OPC 1% team. I'm building something and applied to few competitions. There is a chance of being selected and angel investment. So I'm right now, it's really not possible for me to learn something else which is appropriate and lack of less time. So I'm using live view as it is and building the application and making sure the prototype is something that people will accept, will like and accept. And if the things are accepted, then it will be real fun.
I do have one question for you about LiveView. I won't spoil your AMA too much, but LiveView is of course very exciting. It's getting a lot of traction and a lot of attention. So I would love to hear, in your opinion, what is so compelling about LiveView right now? What is so exciting about it?
The first reason is, of course, write less JavaScript or almost no JavaScript. That's the first answer. And the merits and demerits, there are a lot of things which I really cannot debate right now, but Bruce should be a right person to answer the merits and demerits. For now, I can just say stateful and non-stateful things, but I'm studying if analytics can be great, then whenever our application is such that analytics information we get generate from through analytics, if that is the profit, then live view should be good. So
Yeah, I
like
think that's, yeah, go ahead, please.
so like these days many companies are using tools like Hotjar, and there are so many other things. They draw the heat maps, generate a lot of content. But I believe uh, this this should be possible with live view. I don't know how, but I am definitely going to experiment. Maybe if there is a need, this can be made open source and invite more people. Let's build something using live view. Just we in live view we have different differentiation. We check the differences and generate pin to the browser. If we can use this point somewhere and build a feature like Hotjar or other tools, it will be great. If not, I don't know, but let's give it a try.
Yeah, I think data visualization is going to be a really compelling use case for live view, and I'm definitely excited to see people doing that more and more. And you mentioned this a little bit, and I think you mentioned it as something that Bruce Tate, who's going to be joining you in the AMA, might speak more to. But I did some work in React and Apollo for the first time in years this past week. And the most recent kind of front-endy state management stuff I had been doing was in live view. And then I had to kind of dive into this React app. And, you know, listen, the React app was fine. Like, it was, as far as I understand it, to be very clean code. Like, it wasn't crufty. It wasn't a big old legacy app. It was like a pretty shiny, new, best practicey React app. And I found it still, especially coming from live view, to be so difficult to reason about the state of the web page. And so I think something that for me recently has really made live view so compelling is that it just seems like such a sane and scalable way to manage state for your web app, for your web page, because really everything is like a single page app these days. And trying to manage an increasingly complex like state system for that page with a tool like React or Apollo kind of layered on top of that, working with GraphQL, it felt like I was kind of reaching the limits of like what I could hold in my brain about the state of this page. And I kept thinking to myself like, oh, well, if this was live view, it would be easier in this way or that way, or everything would be kind of managed in this nice organized way on the back end. So I really feel like that's going to be another thing we're going to hear as people adopt live view, hopefully more and more.
I also feel that live view can be a great tool when there is a lot of personalization involved. Like let's say the time where you are, the time is something. So there can be more like auto suggestions, what should be included and what to me they are going to be different. So as there are a lot of personalization thing, live view should reduce the burden. I think that plus live view should be an asset.
Yeah, I think that's right. But on a related note, so speaking of trees and also thinking of the tomato plant that I'm still really impressed by, Claudio's tomato plant, I actually have something that I've been growing that I want to show you guys. I'm just going to go get it. So maybe I'll hand it back to Meryl for a moment.
Good transition. I'm really excited to see what Zoe's growing. One thing that I wanted to just tack onto that is like, it's really interesting to hear about the idea of using live view for state management. That wasn't really one of the benefits to it that I had heard people talk a lot about. I'd mostly heard like, you don't have to write JavaScript anymore, which I think is a lot of backend engineers would cheer for that. But I don't think that it's something that I'm necessarily super opposed to, writing JavaScript. So I think like a really compelling argument for live view is this idea of like, okay, state management, that's like, I get that. Like that makes a lot of sense to me to not.
You're still going to write JavaScript to do fancy front-endy things, but the responsibility of state management lives in one place.
Love that.
And that's the process. That's the socket.
Yeah.
Are you guys ready for my thing that I've been growing?
Thank you, Sophie.
It's never gonna grow. This is some lavender seeds that I planted like probably 3 months ago, and I can't bring myself to throw it away. As you can see, nothing is growing there. So if anyone has tips on how not to be terrible at gardening in an apartment, basically, you know, Sandesh, you don't want to ask me to be involved in your tree planting dream because I will almost certainly ruin it.
I can give you some hope. I at the beginning of March, I just every time I cooked, I put the seeds in places, and there was one that for like 3 months nothing was going on, and I just forgot about it. And one day I saw a small like what do you call in English, like a green thing, small green
Like a
thing.
little, yeah, a little
Yeah,
sprout.
now there are like 3 and they are growing, and and they are peppers, and one is giving a small pepper.
Wow.
So
What
it
you're
took,
saying
I don't know,
is I
like
shouldn't
what
throw this away.
Claudia said, like since they may have been frozen somewhere, it took a lot of time for them to remember that they were seeds.
Well, my husband tried to grow some peppers, and he was getting really excited about them because they were flourishing on our fire escape. He had planted lots of little things, and one of them was just absolutely flourishing. And he was really excited, and we started to see the like fruit start growing on it. And then one day we're walking around the neighborhood, and he stops dead and looks at the ground, and he was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "I don't know." He was like, "That looks exactly like the peppers that were growing." It wasn't peppers. It was something called like black death currant or something like that. It's just like this weed that is extremely easy to grow, and it had invaded like the pepper plants, and it overtook like the entire space where the pepper plants were supposed to be growing. And so he just ripped it out.
Does it give like pepper shaped things also? Because
No.
mine is giving that. So
No. And that was
okay.
another thing. I have like a plant identification app. And so when it was just growing, I took a picture of it and it told us what it was, but it was the weed. And Nathan was like, "Oh, it probably just isn't big enough yet for it to know." And it was.
Okay. Yeah, it's just that wishful thinking. You really want it to be true.
Yeah.
The thing is that in that place, I had also put garlic. So for the first month, I was telling people that it was garlic, and somebody told me like garlic doesn't look like that. So I had to remember what was there.
That's really funny. Do we have any more elixirs that people want to share? I know we haven't maybe asked this.
I have one that's not so elixir, I guess, but it has an emoji, which is mate. And actually, the emoji is pretty similar to the one I have. I have another one, which is not the emoji. And it's a South American kind of tea, but you prepare it not with the small bags. You just put the inside of the bag in this, and you use warm water. And the thing is that I drink a liter a day. So it's the cool thing is that since you drink it slowly, it can last for like 3-4 hours. It's a good entertainment.
Wow. Would you say that it is like brain tea?
It has caffeine, but like some teas, it releases the caffeine slower than coffee, so it doesn't give you this spike. And it also has the property that it stops you from being hungry. So if many people that do diets drink a lot of mate to avoid eating, so. But it's a good thing. Like it's a like slow dripping coffee in a sense.
Did you pick this up during quarantine, or have you done this?
No, I'm from Argentina, so it's common in Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and the south of Brazil. So it's since forever. But when I saw the announcement today about the elixirs, I said other than coffee, I don't drink a lot of things. And talking about coffee is not like really interesting for or new for everybody, but this is kind of and an interesting fact is that because of immigration between Syria and South America, now people in Syria drink it too. So
Whoa,
it's spreading, and people in Germany drink club mate. I don't know if in America it's known. It's a beverage based on the leaf of the bush that makes mate, and it has the kind of the taste. The problem is that it has a lot of caffeine. So I once tried it, and I was like shaking. So I prefer I prefer the natural version and not the.
Wow, we've got some new people in here.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing, y'all. Sweet. So let's see who's in here. We have lots of people in here. Sophie, do you want to pick somebody to interview next?
Yeah, sure. So I think we have another of our keynotes. On deck, we have Linda Acheng Otieno. Did I say that okay? Feel free to correct me.
Quite, but almost.
Almost, okay. Well, we're very happy that you're able to join us. You're one of our keynote speakers. It looks like you and Sigo are giving a talk together. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, or I might be wrong?
Yes, we're giving a talk together. So initially we had the idea of giving a talk about a software that we've built. It's kind of like our 911 in Kenya, because we don't have like 911. If you call 911, you probably won't get a response. So we wanted to talk about it and how we were using Elixir, how we've used Elixir to actually build that, and how it's saved us a lot of money. And we thought it was going to be an expensive venture, but it just Elixir helped us like cut a lot of costs. But now we kind of thought like, okay, so it's not just one thing that we've built with Elixir. We've done so many other things, and we just wanted to share how we are using Elixir to improve lives in Kenya. And we've not done it only in Kenya. We've also worked with like other companies that are not in Kenya, but we've seen how Elixir has helped us like do a lot of stuff. So that's kind of a summary of the whole thing that we're going to talk about.
I'm sure that many of the like folks on the business side of the world who might be listening to this or to your keynote will be very excited to hear that Elixir has helped you save money.
Yeah.
Why is that? Like, what about Elixir has helped you guys cut costs?
We've been able to custom build things that would otherwise we'd have to like buy from other third parties, and they also need to make a profit, so it's they don't give it out like cheaply, so it's really expensive, especially if you're going with like the subscription where pay as you increase or pay as you go. So the more people you have, the more you have to part with money. So having to build that so that you can now have like something custom where you can control it. Now we don't kind of when the system goes down on their side, we also have to suffer. So now the burden is all on us. So it's been a nice one.
Yeah, and I imagine that scaling is very important to you guys. If you're building out a 911 system, your goal is that your users will be 100% of everyone everywhere. So
exactly. Yeah, it's we haven't launched it to the whole country just yet. We've just been trying it like slowly, trying to see how we can scale without having to break everything. So it's interesting. It's interesting that with a few people who've tried it, we already have a lot of people saying that, hey, we need this and this and this. So we are kind of scaling as we are also improving on the things that other people are saying. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, I imagine too that Elixir, I mean, when people talk about Elixir, one of the things they talk about a lot is like fault tolerance and ability to recover from failure, like to be as robust and available as possible. And I'd imagine that that's very important if you're dealing with like an emergency response system. If it goes down and someone's trying to report an emergency, that's absolutely a disaster. So is that one of the reasons you guys reached for Elixir?
Yes, and also the real time and how fast it is. It's those are some of the things that we thought about, but also we were just trying Elixir. It was something new for us, and we were like, okay, let's try and see how this works. And every time we were learning about it, we used to do like just mobs in the office, and at that time we were like 5 people in the office, so we would set out like an hour just to read about Elixir. And every single time, at that time we were using Ruby in the office, and every single time we would try something new, we were like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And with Elixir, we kind of still have that reaction every single time. Like now, we were doing something with a colleague of mine, and we were using binary, and we didn't know we can pattern match with binary. So we did that, and we were like, oh, that is so cool. And yeah, even the community around the Elixir community has also been really, really nice because we have so many dependencies and we don't have to build like so many things. So it's just been a really exciting journey.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that feeling of excitement. The first like major Elixir app in production that I ever worked on, I actually worked on with Meryl. We were on the same team at the time. And I feel like that's an experience that you and I had a lot, right? Like sitting, working on something, it works, and then just being like, oh my God, it works. This is so cool.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, just being like, I don't know if this is possible, but if it was, it would make everything really easy. And then
Yeah.
it was. Yeah, that is really exciting. Just one last question for you. Where are you guys in terms of this application like usage across where you're using it for and like adoption rates for it?
I can say we are in the prototype stage because we're just trying to figure out what is working well, what is not working well, fixing like a little bit of errors, because I feel like it's a really delicate application. You just can't put it out without being exactly sure. You know, we are dealing with people's lives also, and trying to assure them that if you have an emergency, you can count on us. So we don't want you having an emergency and us not being able to help you at that point. So right now, it's not open to everyone. I mean, the USSD codes are there, you can use them, but we've not marketed it out to like every single person. We have like a few groups of people we are looking at, and we're also looking at places where internet connection is and the poor cell phone connection is, because we're also not even using the internet. We don't need the internet, but for the hospital section, we really need them to have internet. So those are some of the key things we are looking at and just how to make it better from where it is at this point.
Yeah, you don't have much of a like space for error once it's rolled out.
Exactly.
Like,
So we are trying to fix as many things as possible with the little number that we are getting. And we keep on trying to increase it every single time by just giving out like more people going to like different villages and telling the chiefs like, hey, please tell your people that they can use this. And we just want to see how it's going to be done. And yeah, sometimes we have to wake up to fix a few things. And I have to say thank you for like the error logging applications because they're life-saving. You don't have to receive like phone calls from people directly, so that's good. So yeah, it's an interesting thing.
yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing job. I'd love to hear from Manuel Rubio. I know you're giving a training, I believe, that's coming up. It hasn't happened yet. And also an AMA.
Yes. First, tomorrow is beginning the training about the Ecto tutorial. If I recall correctly.
I love the idea of your training because I think coming from Ruby to Elixir and being used to the ORM in Ruby, and then seeing Ecto, and you feel like, oh, I kind of have an idea of how to work with this and what to do, and then you really don't because it's pretty different conceptually. It seems like a great like fundamentals to being a power user of Ecto.
Yeah, beginning looks like it's going to be very similar to Active Record. But when you go into the difficult part, that is performing more difficult queries, so you realize that it's not exactly the same at all.
Yeah. And how does that, I know that you're on the AMA for coming to Elixir from other languages. Did you have that experience coming into Ecto?
I learned a lot of different languages in my career. So I started with C language and Java. And after that, I was working with Python, Ruby, PHP, Perl. And after those languages, I started then with Erlang. And with that, we moved to other countries. I'm working now in Stockholm with Erlang Solutions and dedicating mostly to Erlang and Elixir. And those days, more time in Elixir than in Erlang. But it's exciting because we are doing a lot of things in training and conferences and projects with clients. So it's amazing.
It's definitely not surprising that you mentioned that, like, you know, people bring over this active record mindset into working with Ecto, because like it looks kind of the same at first. It's sort of like a DSL around querying. It kind of reads like, you know, English or whatever language. And I think that's definitely the mindset that I brought to working with Ecto at first. And it really held me back. And when I kind of finally shed that way of thinking and really leaned into like what some of the unique and powerful things about Elixir are that lend itself to like working with Ecto, like I think composability is a really great argument for what's so great about Ecto and being able to write these really clean, slim, like pieces of queries that you can then compose with these nice pipelines. And that's something that I feel like I've only just started to get comfortable enough with, that's like what I reach for when I'm writing more complex queries instead of sort of active record, which is much more static and less flexible. I wonder if that's something that you'll be getting into in the querying section of your training, composable queries.
Yeah, well, I think the Ecto is getting the most important parts of the functional programming because it's very easy to create functions and composable chunks, as you say. And you can mix everything in a very understandable way. So, and even you cannot lose the focus of the SQL query that is built under the hood. Well, when you are using SQL. And I think that is the very important part of Ecto regarding the database when you are performing queries, that you can split your code regarding the part that is semantic to the queries you are writing at that moment. You can split them in different schemas and put it in the correct context or different parts of your code as you organize it better. And when you have everything configured and working, you realize that refactoring, testing, and everything that is regarding to whatever you build with Ecto is very understandable, makes sense, and well, it's a good piece of code, definitely.
I know that you guys just talked about composability with Ecto. Are there any other highlights of like why Ecto is kind of a unique ORM or something that it brings us that people coming from other languages and other ORMs would not be familiar with?
Highlights for Ecto. Well, the most significant part that everything is saying always is Ecto is not an ORM. That is not is not working with objects, but even the relational mapping is not working as in the other systems. For example, we were talking about the active record. Mm-hmm. And the active record is a relational mapper that is getting what is in the database and putting in specific objects and making a relationship between the database and what you are getting. And Ecto is getting more flexibility because it's not related to specifically what is in your database. It's getting whatever is in the definition is saying getting anything from your data source to be converted to structs inside of Elixir. And even when you are getting aggregates and other kind of transformations, it's getting to you the flexibility to transform the data in the way you need. So even if you don't need to work with a database, you can still working with, for example, the typical contact forms for the websites. That is, you are not storing that in the database, and even you can use Ecto with that. So I think that the highlight for Ecto is you can use it for validate your data input, whatever is the testing or the use you are going to do with that.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think there's so much to dig into with Ecto, and there's a new release, right? Did I read that? I feel like I should be more up on the news. Aren't there some new exciting things going on with Ecto? We're not sure.
Sorry.
I'm Googling it. Ecto, new release. Isn't there?
The 3.5 maybe?
Yeah, 3.5. I haven't really dug into any of those changes yet, but I definitely am looking forward to it.
Well, the last change I think was more highlighted is the inclusion of the ectoenums, the possibility to define your own types easily.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not types, it's the way to perform enumerations to fix or validate better the types you are defining.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to playing around with that because I have done some like custom type definitions in the past, and I wouldn't say that it was like overly complicated to do that, but it felt like something that would lend itself really nicely to an abstraction. So that is going to be pretty cool to check out. Thank you for sharing that with us. Let's move on to some of our final guests. We have Annette, who is with us, who's participating in the Riak training. We had Mariano telling us a little bit about us earlier, but welcome, Annette.
Hi.
Hi. So you have, I don't know if you caught the earlier part of this event, but basically Mariano was really talking you up as the brains behind the kind of the philosophy of Riak and distributed systems. So I would love to hear a little bit about what brought you to Elixir and working with Riak and how you got involved in this training.
So the story was Riak dates back to 2000 and what was it, 12 or 13? When we had a European research project, the Sync-Free project, where Basho was one of the partners in a project together with us. And what we developed there was a CRDT data store. And we actually, nobody but the Basho people were familiar with Erlang in that group, but they convinced us to use Erlang for programming the CRDT database. It's called Antidote, it's open source. A lot of people have worked on this meanwhile, but it's still like research oriented, say. And eventually, you know, Basho kind of went out of the picture and everything, but we were following, of course, how Riak was developing. And at some point, a couple of years ago, we decided to branch off Riak Core and have our own branch where we would keep up with the language development in essence, just to make sure that everything would work with the most recent Erlang compilers, etc. And yeah, Mariano and I met really by chance. We were introduced to each other by Francesco, who was a really great connector, right, networker. And yeah, he was very excited to make Riak Core more approachable for Elixir people. So this is why we're having this tutorial.
And this is the training that has not happened yet, correct? This is coming up?
It's tomorrow. Yeah.
It's tomorrow. Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. I don't know much about Riak Core or Riak Core Lite, so I will be looking that up. Is there anyone that you would suggest for somebody that doesn't know much about it to get a good overview? And
there's actually there's some nice online resource that was written by, I think, Mariano and a few other people a couple of years ago already, which is called The Little Book of Riak Core. And this already gives a very nice introduction. The interfaces have not changed a lot. A bit of the background stuff has changed, and we now have everything in a way that is kind of working very smoothly with the whole Beam ecosystem. So it doesn't really matter whether you're linking this in from Erlang or using it from Erlang, using it from Elixir. This works all pretty smoothly. So just to give you some numbers, how it compares with the current branch of Riak Core. So what we did in essence was splitting or taking half of the code base out. So we're now down to 13,000 lines of code compared to like 25,000 lines of code in Riak Core in the current 3.0 developer branch. And we only have 49 modules left. and only one external dependency. So this makes it very nice and small and very viable to use in projects without getting too much external dependencies on that sometimes are conflicting with your own and stuff like that.
That is incredibly light. That's great.
Yeah, so we really analyzed all the modules that were there and cut out everything that we did not see necessary. So we're using it quite heavily in Antidote, and I'm pretty sure that like it's still working correctly. So we refactored all the tests. They're all still running. And as I said, the APIs kind of stay the same, but it seems more approachable for people than the original version that was refactored out of Riak, KV. And well, it's a great starting point, and the Basher engineers did a wonderful work to get this all together, because it's a very nice a piece of engineering, I must say. But yeah, as software maintenance takes, right, it's a lot of work to keep this up to date with the most recent logging, with the testing frameworks and everything. But yeah, we're happy to save it.
It's amazing. I want to get to our last speaker that we have in the room right now, Thomas O'Rourke, and ask you about the Elixir that you wrote in about. I know that you're one of the people that told us about it, and especially
my COVID cure.
Yeah.
Yes, it's here.
Tell us about it, please.
Well, it's something I make every summer. It's a combination of stinging nettles, which you'll know in Europe as the things that sting you when you walk on them, and a mushroom which grows on the side of birch trees, and a bunch of other things, some ginger, some brewer's yeast, and you let it brew for a few months. And it's a very strong anti-inflammant and a health full of great antioxidants for you. So I make about 20 bottles. This one almost blew up though. I mean, the pressure sometimes gets to be dangerous. So it sprayed all over when I opened it, but it's aged to 3 months now. So it's about 4% alcohol, 3%.
So is this if this had a magical aspect to it, would it be that it cures COVID, or is that a real aspect?
It cures everything, yes. I mean, chaga is an old also recipe in Russia to cure basically just about everything. If you look it up on the internet, chaga, C-H-A-G-A, but it's stinging nettles as well as used in a lot of health potions, you could say, and I won't go into all the details because I'm not a qualified medical expert. So
I'm so pleased to have a real magic potion making an appearance in this event. Very on theme,
a real
so
elixir. Yes, just to show you, I will drink some. Yes. Yeah. Am I allowed to drink some here? Yes.
By all means. Yes, I mean, this sounds really good. I'm kind of wishing I could get my hands.
It does have a fair amount of fizz there, so.
Nice.
You know, they say that, well, it's true, and before hops became widely available, they used to use stinging nettles in the Middle Ages to make beer. So it's actually, it's not that uncommon. So, or nowadays it is, but oh well.
That is so
anyways, yeah. And I do have my dogs with me as well, so.
Oh, please.
And I have my Elixir shirt on. I had some requirements, so.
You are so ready. I think you're kind of winning this.
So this is a 2016 Elixir shirt, so yeah. And you said introduce everyone. So.
Oh, hello.
Stop. Is this a poodle?
No, it's a Legato. It's an Italian truffle hunting dog.
Oh my God, I'm in love with him.
Truffle hunting dog?
That face.
Mushrooms. No, they're used to find mushrooms and stuff in the forest, but they're just fun dogs. So.
Does he find the mushroom on birch trees that you use for your potion?
I've been trying to train them to find some contrarellis, which are really good chanterelles, I guess, but not successful so far. So they just keep me warm. I mean, I live in Finland, so they, you know, if the nights are really cold, the dogs are in the bed keeping you warm. So
they're not entirely useless.
No. No, there's another one here too. Okay, and yeah, the Elixir 2016. So
Nice.
this one has so much. Everybody
Nice.
thought this is like a bib. So if you spill your drink, it's like.
Yeah, that's what that's for.
Well, Thomas, can you give us a quick idea of what you are going to be talking about at the conference?
I can. I work at I've actually proposed talks before to Elixir conferences, but never been accepted. This year, I proposed to talk about some of the production projects that we've worked on at a bank. I work at sort of the largest bank in Finland, and so it's kind of a more conservative and traditional environment. And we've successfully launched a few Elixir projects now. One of them is a biometrics, a facial recognition system that you can use to buy coffee and other things. Anyways, we're rolling it out at different places. It's one of the first biometric facial recognition systems in Europe. And anyways, there's Elixir in it. And it's been a fun challenge to get, to introduce Elixir. I think that's the thing, as Elixir is used more and more in different commercial production settings. It's always fun to get to talk about that. So, and that's what I'll be sharing. Just some of the, the different practical things we have, challenges, some of the fun stories, trying not to insult anybody at the same time. So, yeah.
Change some names to
Throwing the
pretend.
right amount of shade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try not to bash Elixir people. Everybody's so nice, and it's inappropriate to bash on. It's always good to talk about why Elixir is so great and cool, but not really so much about like what would happen in other environments or languages. So
yeah, it's a tough balance to strike. But I'm definitely seeing a running theme from some of these talks, just like so much production adoption, Elixir at scale, solving some really interesting technical problems in, banking or the financial space and in so many other areas. So I think we have a really great lineup for the next couple of days, and we are just about out of time, but I absolutely would love to thank all of these speakers and trainers and sponsors who joined us for this talk. Would love to thank the ElixirConf organizers who put this together. It's no small feat, that's for sure, to coordinate this many people on a Zoom call or a remote event. And obviously, thank you, Meryl, for working on this with us and joining me. Super fun as always. And for anyone watching, please join us over the next few days. You can definitely see that we have some really great talks lined up for you. And yeah, thanks again. Bye, everybody.
okay, bye.
Bye.